everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be going over the severe weather potential over the next several days, including the potential for tornadoes. We'll also be going over Tropical Storm Nicole, which is set to make landfall in Florida late tonight. And we'll also be talking about an enormous cold blast that is coming towards the United States that is not going to just bring cold air to almost the entire country, but it will also bring a big winter storm over the next 36 hours to the northern plains. Let's first begin with what's happening across the United States, though, today, which we have a few interesting features out there. First, beginning with the Northeast, we have a high pressure system that is dominating New England. This will actually continue to start to move a little bit further off to the north and east, but it is bringing that little tropical storm back down east of Florida. That is actually being controlled by that high pressure system. So that is why Nicole is actually moving more in a westerly direction. But once this trough back over here in the western side of the United States moves further to the east, we will eventually have that jet stream pick up Nicole. So Nicole will take a big boomerang turn to the northeast and go towards New England heading into this upcoming weekend. Again, more on that here later in this forecast. With all that being said, we're going to have a very active next 7 to 14 days across the United States, with several systems bringing both rain and snow, some severe weather, obviously the tropical storm that we have ongoing. So again, it's going to be very active over the next few weeks. But one thing to really note here over the short term is, again, we'll have that potential for a snowstorm back up in the Dakotas and even into Minnesota, and there will also be a potential for severe weather across portions of the Midwest and Central Plains heading into tomorrow. More on that here in a little bit. Also, Tropical Storm Nicole, potentially a hurricane upon landfall, will make landfall later tonight. This will eventually bring a lot of rain to the East Coast. It will bring a pretty hefty tornado potential as well, especially to areas over in the Carolinas heading into Friday. I'll have more details on that later in this forecast. Eventually, this will move off to the Northeast and bring a lot of rain to New England for a short amount of time heading into Friday and Saturday, with wind gusts peaking as high as 50 to 55 miles per hour up there. Eventually, it's going to dry out early next week, only basically late Sunday into Monday. We'll have another system develop back down into the southern plains. That could even bring some potentially a little bit of snow to Oklahoma. So we have to watch that kind of closely. Early kind of indication showing we might see a little bit of winter precipitation out of that. And also, the temperatures are going to be cold over the next several days. Really not now, but between next Monday to Friday, we are going to see a big cold pattern kind of a rise to the United States, especially over the central and eastern portions of the United States. We are expecting below average temperatures. The Climate Prediction Center has the entire United States under some sort of indication that will probably have below average temperatures for next week. So big indication showing big cool downs are coming. Also, the overall temperature anomaly showing what our temperatures are overall going to be. This is all the warmer air over the next several days will pretty much be above average on the eastern half of the United States going into Thursday and Friday, but that cold front does arrive with that trough back up in the north heading into Saturday. That will bring much cooler weather and usher it down into areas like the southern plains. Eventually heading to Sunday and Monday of next week, we'll have a little bit of relief going back closer to average across the southeast United States, but another cold blast will arrive going into next week. That'll bring much cooler air, and it does not seem like we have any indication in the short term that we'll have warmer weather coming beyond the couple of cold blasts. So obviously it's going to be pretty cold, it looks like, at least for mid-November. Just to give you an idea of what those temperatures could be, it could get very cold. Again, we could be talking about sub-zero temperatures back up in the North Dakota region. On the other hand, we'll see potentially freezing temperatures going into Monday morning that extends almost across every state in the United States. So I'll have to watch this again very closely over the next several days. But more importantly, in the short term, we have a big winter storm coming to areas back over in the northern plains. We'll have to be watching this pretty closely because, again, we might see upwards of 18 inches of snow in some areas like North Dakota. So going into basically late tonight into tomorrow, snow will on go, potentially even a little bit of a wintry mix back over into Minnesota, heavy snow potentially in northwest Minnesota, eventually heading into late Thursday into Friday morning, just some isolated light snow or flurries remaining from that system as it races off to the northeast. We could even see a few flurries back up in northern Wisconsin, so if you're over in that region, might see a little bit of some flurries. Nothing in terms of accumulations is really expected though at this point. In terms of snowfall accumulations, most of the regions around this area will see some pretty substantial actually accumulations. It will be a wet snow, so that's going to accumulate much quicker. Talking about the potential again for this region, seeing between 12 to 18 inches of snow from northwest Minnesota back through southern North Dakota. On the other hand, there will be a pretty sharp divide in between really an inch or two of snow all the way back up to, again, a foot or so of snow as well. So big sharp divide there. And we do have several days of severe weather coming up. Beginning with today, there's only two areas to watch. One will be across Nebraska and Kansas for isolated downburst winds. On the other hand, we have a tornado potential Nicole across eastern Florida, there is a slight risk of severe weather currently that would extend from about Palm Bay back through about Jacksonville, Florida. So definitely something to monitor for today. Tomorrow, it will increase. We'll have a bigger chance across areas like the Midwest into the Central Plains. The potential for maybe an isolated tornado or two, and as well as damaging winds will be possible going into tomorrow late morning into the afternoon hours. Not really much of an evening or overnight threat. And then also another tornado chance going into areas like Florida back through southern North Carolina. So that will be something to watch for very closely. Heading into Friday, we actually have a pretty large slight risk and marginal threat. It's going to include areas from New Jersey and Pennsylvania all the way back through South Carolina. So a rare threat of severe weather going into November, by the way, for areas like Pennsylvania and New Jersey. That's not usual, by the way. So definitely unusual activity. That's all due to obviously seeing Tropical Storm Nicole. Now, what's going to happen over the next several hours? Well, we're going to have really, again, some showers and potentially a couple of downpours across Florida throughout much of today. But going closer to the evening hours, again, Tropical Storm Nicole or Hurricane Nicole will get much closer to making landfall. So by about 9 or 10 o'clock tonight, it is going to get very close to landfall. Here's your center or your eye of where that tropical storm / hurricane will be. Eventually, Nicole is expected to make landfall sometime around about 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. tonight. That's kind of my ETA at this point in terms of the landfall. Currently expected to make landfall pretty close to Port St. Lucie. Eventually getting closer to 3 to 4 in the morning. We'll still see a lot of rain on go. Again, rain is not the biggest concern out of this system. Storm surge definitely is, but rain could accumulate. We could even see some isolated flash flooding along with that. Obviously, the big discussion over the last several days has been Tropical Storm Nicole. One of the most insane features about this tropical storm, which is quite remarkable, is the wind field. This wind field is approximately 600 miles wide from west to east, and it is, again, pretty much the size of Texas. So it is huge. It will be continuing to impact especially areas like the peninsula of Florida. We do have tropical storm warnings in effect up and down portions of the east coast of Florida, and as well as the Bahamas. It is forecasted to become a low-end Category 1 hurricane, sustained winds around 75 to maybe 80 miles per hour. Tropical storm warnings in effect through the Carolina coast as well, back into South Carolina. Also, even over through the panhandle of Florida, all the way back through the west coast, we also have tropical storm warnings there, and that's more for the fact of storm surge and maybe even a few of those areas seeing some tropical storm force winds. Storm surge is a big threat with this. 3 to 5 feet across a large area of Florida, all across the east coast is going to be possible, as well as even through areas near the Anclote River, as all the way back through the Indian Pass. That's the area that we could potentially see some storm surge upwards of 5 feet, even on the west coast of Florida. So be mindful of that. Make sure you're sharing this with other people so they're aware of that as well. And you might be wondering, what can you expect in terms of wind gusts for today? Well, winds will really start to pick up later this afternoon across Florida. So currently going into closer to the 1 to 2 p.m. hour, we're going to have some winds getting closer to 40 to 50 miles per hour, eventually getting closer to about 6, 7 o'clock tonight in terms of the rush hour commute. Wind gusts will really begin to pick up between 50 to 60 miles per hour across the east coast of Florida, and eventually going closer to about 10 o'clock tonight, wind gusts will exceed 60 miles per hour, could very well peak at around 80 to 85 miles per hour wherever this tropical storm or hurricane decides to make landfall. Eventually closer to about 1 to 2 in the morning, it is expected to make landfall most likely somewhere between West Palm Beach to Palm Bay. The most likely scenario is this will make landfall near Port St. Lucie. Eventually closer to about 6 to 7 in the morning tomorrow. Winds will still be pretty high even during the morning hours. Palm Bay potentially still upwards of 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts, and eventually this will move off the coast into the Gulf of Mexico. With the lack of warm waters, it is not going to really strengthen there over the Gulf of Mexico. And you might be wondering, how much rain will we see out of this? Because this doesn't have any comparison to Ian, where we saw up to 2 feet of rain in Florida. More than anything, the peak of rainfall will be near 7 to 8 inches in an isolated area or two, but I would expect generally across Florida, maybe 1 to 4 inches is going to be kind of your range. Again, isolated amounts could go a little bit higher than that, but that's my expectation at this point. Make sure to like button down below, subscribe if you're not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.